leave Hetty here. This all started with me looking for my Prussian roots. We'd always been told stories about, when we were growing up, of how we were descended from Prussian aristocracy on my mum's side. I decided to sign up to Ancestry and do a DNA test to see if we could find more. Decided to look into my dad's side, and it soon became apparent that there was loads of interesting stuff happening on that side as well. So it's direct leading to how we named Hetty. So before my dad passed away, I started digging into my family history, as initially, as I said, to look into the Prussian side and to try and find the name of my great-grandfather, which seems to have been lost during the war. However, I soon hit a brick wall, and so to try and kill the time, while maybe the DNA results in the database caught up and we got some more leads, I decided to look into my dad's side of the family. So it was during this search that we found her, Henrietta Boswell. Her married name was Buckley, and she was named the Queen of the Bohemia tribe of Eastwood in Southend. She was a Romany Gypsy Queen, which was pretty amazing. And we found clippings in the newspapers about her funeral, how it was so large. Over 100 people attended her funeral. They described the mourners, and they also described in another newspaper article how she seemed to have foreseen her own death earlier in the week. So she sounded like an absolutely amazing figure, and it turns out she had 20 children and over 100 grandchildren, one of whom was my grandfather, my dad's dad, and he was born literally a few months before Henrietta died, so it's very, very likely that she actually met him. So my dad passed away from cancer in 2023, and it was sudden. And a year later, as I've talked about earlier, we got our inheritance from him and we used it to buy Hetty. So initially I was sort of not sure about giving Hetty a name, but my wife suggested that we should, and that we should name her Henrietta, Queen of the Gypsies, after my great-grandmother. We did that, but I was reluctant to use the full name, so we shortened Henrietta to Hetty because it was a bit more catchy, and I left off the Queen of the Gypsy part because in truth I was worried about what other people would think. So when people asked me where the name came from, because it's quite unusual, I just used to choose a safe option and say after my second great-grandmother on my dad's side, which was fitting because obviously we bought Hetty with his inheritance money, so it sort of honours him and his side of the family. But I was too sort of ashamed to use the full name that we wanted to give her. However, the longer we had Hetty, the more time I spent sitting with what I'd found and what we'd named her. Something started to change. I realised that the full name actually suited her better. It honoured my dad and his roots more than just calling her Hetty did. But it was more than that. She isn't a show queen. She's kept on the road, running, going to places our ancestors revered, to places that people just mostly drive past every day when we used to. That's why the name fits her even more. She's polished and looked after, yes, but she isn't for show. She loves the road. She's our Gypsy Queen. So this whole journey started really because we didn't want to live our lives by someone else's script anymore. We wanted to live our own life, not the version that we thought we were supposed to follow. When it came to this, I realised that's exactly what I was doing. I was leaving parts of ourselves out because of what other people would think, that it wouldn't fit in with other people's views and script. And that's not the life we wanted to live anymore. So we decided we'd done leaving parts of ourselves out just to follow scripts that aren't ours. She's not just Hetty anymore, she's Hetty the Gypsy Queen. And I'm going to take her to where Henrietta Boswell is buried in honour of that new title. And she's got that title not because it sounds impressive, but because it's true. She carries my dad's memory, my dad's ancestry. She carries part of our story, and she does it by staying on the road, exactly how those Romany gypsies did. So Henrietta Boswell Buckley is buried in a graveyard in a small, really old church in Eastwood in Southend, right next to Southend Airport. In fact, the boundary line is literally the boundary to the airport. So we did some digging and we found Henrietta and her husband Santalina in the records for the church. However, there's no numbered plot for their grave and there's no plot number for any section. This presents a problem because a lot of Romany burials were not using a stone headstone because they couldn't afford them. And so it's quite possible that there was no headstone there. But we decided to go and look anyway.
Yeah, no, there could have been. They're peeling because they're fake leather. Yeah, it's very much peeling. That's what I said, but they both Nathan and Dad said no. I know.
There's some Buckleys over this side. I know that for a fact. Not going to show you out of respect. But very, very peaceful old church. Probably not going to be open. Somewhere around here, Henrietta is buried. See, what do you think? Oh, yeah. So on the website, the church is laid out in plots, the churchyard. All the graves with stones on are actually in a database that you can access, and all the entire church records are in that database as well. So we know that Henrietta, my second great grandmother, doesn't have a headstone here, or not one that's readable. See, it could be like one of these, possibly. That aren't. We searched and we searched, and we found plenty of generations of Buckleys and Boswells buried there. So it's obviously quite a well-known Romany graveyard. But we couldn't find Hetty or Sant'Elena's grave, unfortunately. You can hear it. It's going to take off. It could be that one of the graves that we found, one of many that were so weathered you couldn't read the inscriptions on, that could be her grave or Sant'Elena's grave. But we just don't know. They're illegible. But knowing that she's there and we were in the right place seemed the right thing, and to bring Hetty, it seemed the right thing as well. I thought bringing Hetty here would be like some sort of full circle thing. Didn't quite work out that way, not being able to find exactly where she's buried, but it still felt right to bring Hetty here to the place that she's in, and to see this beautiful old church as well, which has some intriguing bits to it. The church is still standing. The stones are still there. Time has just done what time does. Some things survive clearly. And other things fade. Can't read it. We'll keep looking into the records, but at least Henrietta's name isn't forgotten, and it still travels around just as she did. Hetty carries my dad's memory. She also now carries this part of our family history. I'm not embarrassed anymore. She's Hetty the Gypsy Queen, and it seems right and proper to say that out loud. I went looking for one story and found another one that was just as intriguing, and we are still looking at the other one, and maybe sometime in the future we're going to need to take Hetty to Germany to find the lost parts of my mum's side of the family, because it looks like that's the only way that we're going to get the full story. We're not just keeping a van running, we're keeping the people in our history alive the only way that we can, by continuing to live and create in their name. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoy the videos. Take care.